Imagine waking up one morning, opening your phone, and realizing that everything you thought you knew about DC movies, HBO shows, and the streaming landscape has just changed. Netflix, the platform where you binge anime, reality shows, and crime documentaries, suddenly owns the home of Batman, Superman, Harry Potter, and Westeros. Your favorite heroes, your most hyped upcoming movies, your comfort shows, all sitting under a new overlord. Exciting? Terrifying? Confusing? Probably all three at once. In this video, I want to give you something you're not really getting on social media right now. A clear-headed, fan-focused survival guide to what a Netflix Warner Bros. Discovery deal could actually mean for you. Not just the headlines, not just breaking news, but what happens next? What happens to DC Studios? What happens to James Gunn's new DC universe? What happens to the dream of the Snyderverse? What happens to theaters, to HBO Max, and to the way you experience these stories over the next decade? By the end of this video, you're going to understand three big things. First, what this kind of deal really means behind all the corporate jargon. Second, the most realistic futures for DC under Netflix, from best case to worst case. And third, how you, as a fan, can cut through the noise, manage your expectations, and still enjoy what's coming without getting burned by constant reboots and hype cycles. So stick with me, because this isn't just a news reaction. This is a full breakdown of the future of DC fandom in a world where Netflix holds the keys to the kingdom. Let's start by making sense of what's reportedly happening. The basic story is this. Netflix has come out on top in a bidding war for Warner Bros. Discovery, at least according to major industry outlets. They've entered exclusive deal talks, which basically means, all right, everyone else step aside. We're going to try to make this official. The important part for you and me isn't just that one company is buying another. It's what's inside that box labeled Warner Bros. Discovery. Because inside that box is HBO, HBO Max, Warner Bros. Pictures, DC Studios, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and a ton of other massive franchises. Now, depending on how the final deal is structured, Netflix isn't necessarily buying every single thing with the Warner name slapped on it, but they are aiming for the crown jewels, the studios, the streaming assets, and yes, the DC machine. That's why this feels so huge. This isn't like Netflix buying some small studio. This is Netflix getting its hands on an entire universe of characters and worlds that fans have been emotionally invested in for years, sometimes decades. If you're a DC fan, your first thought is probably, okay, but what happens to the DC universe that James Gunn just started building? That's the heart of it, right? We've already watched one connected DC universe rise and fall. The Snyder era gave us massive moments, huge fan movements, and then a really messy, painful ending for a lot of people who love that version of the characters. Then just as the new reboot is starting with a fresh Superman, Supergirl on the way, projects like Lanterns being teased, suddenly the parent company's getting sold again. It feels like moving into a new apartment, and then the landlord changes the next week. You haven't even unpacked your posters yet. Before we dig into the DC-specific stuff, I want to zoom out and quickly explain how we ended up here. Because this isn't just about DC, it's about the entire streaming war finally reaching a breaking point. For years, every studio tried to copy Netflix. Disney launched Disney+, Warner launched HBO Max, Paramount launched Paramount+, Peacock showed up. Suddenly, every company wanted you to pay a monthly subscription and live in their walled garden. But there was a problem. You only have so much money, and they only have so many hits. Warner Bros. Discovery has been in a rough spot for a while. With a ton of debt, a bunch of conflicting strategies, and some controversial decisions like canceling finished projects and restructuring entire slates. At the same time, Netflix has been looking for ways to evolve beyond just being the streaming service. They've tried dipping into gaming, live events, limited theatrical runs, and bigger original universes. So a deal where Netflix gets control over a legendary studio and its libraries is like skipping 5 levels in a video game. Instead of slowly building franchises from scratch, they just buy the company that already has them. Now let's bring this back to where your heart probably is, DC. Right now, James Gunn and Peter Safran are the heads of DC Studios. They've got a multi-year plan that starts with a new Superman, leads into Supergirl, brings in characters like Clayface, and launches shows like Lanterns. The idea is to build a fresh, connected DC universe from the ground up, with the freedom to use big characters and smaller ones in a consistent story. Whether you personally love or hate that vision, it is a plan. It's something structured in a way that the previous version of the DC film universe never fully got to be. So what happens to that plan if Netflix takes over? The first thing to understand is that big corporations don't usually like blowing up a brand new plan before it has had time to prove itself. A new owner will almost always ask, what's working? What's not? What's already in motion? In this case, Superman has already launched. Supergirl is on the way. Lanterns has been developed enough to show early footage. Marketing spends have been committed. There's a pipeline of projects, contracts, production schedules, and various rights agreements all tied to this new DC universe. Stopping that midway isn't just a creative decision, it's a financial headache. That's why one of the most realistic scenarios is actually the least dramatic. Netflix steps in, takes a deep breath, and lets James Gunn finish at least the first chapter of his DCU plan. They can still adjust budgets, marketing strategies, and timelines, but they don't slam the brakes overnight. They look at the numbers from Superman and the next few releases. They look at fan response. Then maybe 3 to 5 years down the line, they decide whether to double down, adjust course, or pivot to something else. Will everyone love that? No. If you're someone who desperately wants the Snyderverse back exactly as it was, you're probably hoping for a complete reversal. If you're someone who really clicked with the new Superman and is excited for a fresh Justice League, you're probably terrified this sale could derail everything. The truth is likely to land somewhere in between. Let's talk about the Snyderverse directly, because it always comes up in these conversations. Zack Snyder has a passionate and extremely loyal fan base, especially around his versions of Superman, Batman, and the Justice League. He also has an existing relationship with Netflix thanks to his original films there. That alone has fueled a lot of speculation that if Netflix ever got DC, they'd immediately restore the Snyderverse, push James Gunn aside, and just continue from where things left off. It's a fun fantasy for some people, but we need to be honest about the logistical nightmare that would be. First, you'd have to reassemble that original cast. Some of those actors may have moved on, some may not be interested, and some are surrounded by controversy that a new corporate owner might not be eager to reignite. Second, you'd be asking general audiences who are already confused by all the reboots to switch gears again, going from old universe to new universe, back to old universe, likely while some of the new projects are still fresh in their minds. Third, from a branding perspective, it would send a message that the company has no long-term plan and just jumps ship whenever a vocal online group pushes hard enough. Big corporations very rarely want to look that reactive. Does that mean the Snyderverse is 100% gone forever in a world where Netflix owns DC? Not necessarily. There are more nuanced ways it could live on. You could see special event projects down the line, Elseworld-style one-offs, animated continuations, or even cameos and multiverse crossovers if the new DCU ever plays with that concept. Netflix in particular loves limited series and special events that create buzz without committing to a permanent direction. But a full-on, official, we're canceling the new DCU, restoring the old one, and rewinding the clock move is probably one of the least likely scenarios if you look at this from a business point of view rather than an emotional one. Now let's shift to something that affects not just DC fans, but anyone who loves big screen experiences. The question of theaters. One of the biggest worries when people hear Netflix is buying Warner Brothers is that everything will just become streaming first. People imagine a world where the next Justice League movie drops on your couch on a Friday and never hits the big screen. For some viewers, that sounds great. For a lot of us, especially fans who grew up watching superhero movies in packed theaters, that sounds sad and empty. Interestingly, some of the early chatter around this kind of deal has suggested that Netflix understands the value of theatrical releases, especially for huge franchises. They've dabbled in theaters with a few titles and special events before, but owning a major studio with built-in blockbuster franchises changes the stakes. If you're Netflix and you now own Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and a library of global brands, you're not going to ignore the billions of dollars that can be made from theatrical runs, merchandise, brand deals, and cultural moments that only happen when everyone is watching the same thing on opening weekend. So if you're someone who wants to sit in a dark room, hear the crowd react, and watch a new Justice League or Batman film on the biggest screen possible, there's actually a strong argument that Netflix will lean into that more, not less, with access to these kind of IPs. The money is too good, and the prestige of big theatrical releases helps elevate the brand, even when the movie lands on streaming later. It shifts Netflix from that app on your phone to the company that gives us event movies and then lets us rewatch them at home. Of course, that doesn't mean every project will hit theaters. Under a Netflix-controlled DC, you could absolutely see a split strategy. Huge tentpole films for theaters, more experimental or lower-budget stories sent straight to streaming, and shows that deepen the universe released as series. That can actually be a good thing creatively. A character who might not carry a billion-dollar theatrical film could absolutely shine in an 8-episode streaming series tied into the bigger universe. The key is balance, using theaters when it counts, and using streaming when it lets you tell richer, riskier stories. Now let's go back to James Gunn in the new DCU for a minute. One of the criticisms some fans have is that the first wave of projects didn't absolutely blow the box office out of the water. For people who compare everything to the billion-dollar benchmarks of the past, that can feel disappointing, but the numbers don't exist in a vacuum. The superhero genre in general is in a different place now. Audience fatigue is real. People are more selective. In that context, a film that makes a solid profit, sets up future stories, and gets people cautiously optimistic isn't a failure. It's a foundation. From a corporate perspective, a new owner like Netflix is going to look at trends, not just a single box office number. Did the movie make a profit? Did it grow the brand globally on streaming afterward? Did it boost subscriptions when it landed on the platform? Did it help sell the idea that this is a universe worth following? If the answers are mostly yes, then the incentive is to keep building rather than tearing it all down to start over yet again. Stability is a value in itself. This is something fans don't always see because we experience these universes on an emotional level. We fall in love with a particular actor as Superman, a certain tone for Batman, or a specific director's vision. Then when executives make decisions that seem to ignore that emotional investment, we feel betrayed. But corporate logic runs on a different track. It's not about which version was better in your opinion or mine. It's about which version can consistently generate profit, keep subscribers around, and grow the brand over time. That's why I think the most likely path under Netflix looks like this. Finish building out the first main chapter of the Gunn-led DCU, monitor performance closely, and only make big changes once there's enough data to justify them. Along the way, maybe experiment with side projects that tap into nostalgia, one-off Elseworld stories, or collaborations with creators like Snyder on limited-run content that doesn't break the main continuity. That way, the company gets to scratch multiple creative itches and speak to different segments of the fan base without constantly rebooting everything from scratch. Let's talk briefly about the other studios in this picture, like Paramount, because that also tells you something important. When another major company loses out on a deal like this, you often hear arguments about things like monopolies, unfair advantages, and whether regulators will even allow the acquisition. That sort of behind-the-scenes wrestling might slow things down or change some terms, but the larger trend is clear. The streaming wars are consolidating. There are going to be fewer platforms owning more stuff. That consolidation means that the companies who survive are the ones with big libraries, iconic brands, and the scale to invest in expensive, long-term universes. Let's talk briefly about the other studios in this picture, like Paramount, because that also tells you something important. When another major company loses out on a deal like this, you often hear arguments about things like monopolies, unfair advantages, and whether regulators will even allow the acquisition. That sort of behind-the-scenes wrestling might slow things down or change some terms, but the larger trend is clear. The streaming wars are consolidating. There are going to be fewer platforms owning more stuff. That consolidation means that the companies who survive are the ones with big libraries, iconic brands, and the scale to invest in expensive, long-term universes. From a fan's point of view, that's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's scary because if one company makes a decision you hate, it impacts a huge chunk of the entertainment you care about. On the other hand, it can also mean more consistent funding and long-term planning for the franchises you love. If Netflix is now deeply invested in making DC, Harry Potter, and other Warner franchises work, they're going to pour a lot of resources into doing that. They can't afford to let those brands flop because they didn't just license them for a year. They bought the whole house. So where does that leave you right now in the middle of this storm of speculation, rumor, and hot takes? I think there are a few practical mindset shifts that can really help. First, separate what's confirmed from what's wishful thinking. It's totally fine to hope for a restored Snyderverse, or to root for James Gunn's plan to succeed, or to dream about both coexisting somehow. But when you hear people speak in absolutes, it's definitely happening, or there's no chance, remember that most people outside the boardroom know as much as you do. They're connecting dots, making guesses, and projecting their own preferences. Second, judge the actual projects, not just the corporate headlines. If a new DC movie comes out under this new ownership and it's great, let it be great. Don't deny yourself the joy of enjoying it just because you're angry about past decisions. At the same time, if something is lazy, shallow, or badly handled, you don't have to defend it just because it's part of your universe. Support the things that are genuinely good and hold everything to a standard, regardless of which logo is at the front. Third, protect your own hype levels. This is a big one, especially in an era of constant leaks, rumors, and teases. Every new piece of news doesn't have to become your entire personality for a week. You can be curious without being consumed. You can hope without building such a big fantasy in your head that any real-world version will disappoint you. When you hear about a potential deal, a casting rumor, or a creative shift, treat it as one piece of a long-term story, not the final chapter. Finally, remember why you fell in love with these characters and worlds in the first place. It probably wasn't because of a shareholder call or a corporate merger. It was because you saw Superman make an impossible choice, or Batman face his fears, or Wonder Woman step onto the battlefield and refuse to back down. It was the feeling of sitting in a theater or on a couch and getting swept into a story bigger than yourself. That feeling can survive studio sales, recastings, reboots, and even entire universes ending. As long as talented people are allowed to tell bold, emotional stories with these characters, there will always be something worth watching. So if Netflix really does end up owning Warner Bros. Discovery, HBO Max, and DC Studios, here's my honest prediction as a fan and a strategist. The industry will absolutely change. Streaming will evolve. Theaters will have to share the spotlight with platforms more than ever. Some things you love will end. New things you don't trust yet will begin. The Snyderverse probably won't magically spring back to life as the main timeline, but it might live on in smarter, smaller, more strategic ways. James Gunn's DCU will likely be given time to either prove itself or fail on its own merits. And through it all, you'll keep having chances, over and over, to decide what's worth your time, your money, and your emotional investment. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Not just, are you Team Gunn or Team Snyder, but deeper than that. What do you actually want from DC over the next 10 years, no matter who owns it? Do you want a tight, focused universe with fewer projects but higher quality? Do you want wild Elseworld experiments and multiverse crossovers? Do you want the return of specific actors, or are you ready for completely new faces? Drop your honest vision in the comments, because I think fans need to start talking about what we want long-term, not just reacting to each new headline. And if you found this breakdown helpful, consider sticking around. I'll be following every major update on this situation, not just with breaking news reactions, but with deep dives into what it actually means for the stories and characters we care about. Thanks for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves, and no matter which universe you're rooting for, remember, as long as we keep showing up for good storytelling, these worlds will never really fade away.